If we're going to rethink service management, we'll have to start with services. This section will help you understand the importance of a logically repeatable definition of a service and how the USM method achieves this. I'll introduce USM's customer supplier interaction model and lay some groundwork for the next few modules. But understand that you can't effectively manage services if you don't have everyone define them in an unambiguous and repeatable way. The USM method defines a service as a supported facility, which is logically repeatable by any provider and provides an operable definition. This is critically important for all service teams and an important first step for anyone starting to use the USM method. If you look at some of the practice guidance, you'll find that each have their own definition of a service. So IDLE, FitSM, COBIT, and others all have similar definitions. But they're kind of open to interpretation or a little ambiguous. And in COBIT's case, it's just limited to the IT organization. And ironically, the ISO standards are even worse. They have over 100 different definitions of a service. Now, talk about the nature of the improvement piece. These definitions are not operable and or are not applicable at an enterprise level. So in this section, we'll talk about how the USM method saw this and sought to come up with a definition that could apply to any service provider for any service and would provide a structure for consistent and logically repeatable service specifications by everyone in a service supply chain. So let's introduce USM's customer provider interaction model. The service provider provides services to customers based on agreements. The customer is the one that enters into the agreement with the provider. And the users are the people who are authorized by the customer to use the service. Services deliver value to customers and return value to the provider. So how does the USM method define a service? As we said, enterprise service management requires an unambiguous, logically repeatable definition of a service. So remember we talked about those facilitating disciplines? A service provides the customer with a facility that they want or need. Now, when we say a business facility, we sometimes think of a location or a building, like an office building, a hotel, or a manufacturing plant. And that's why we often think of facilities management as a profession that performs maintenance of an organization's building and equipment. But a business facility could also mean a loan of money or a guarantee. For example, an overdraft facility arranged with a bank. When we use the term facility in USM, it's more aligned with its use as a feature or product that allows you to do something. So USM's definition of a facility is the combination of goods and actions that are made available to a customer in the course of service delivery and that are supported by the provider in their use by that customer. The nature of a facility could be anything, so it could apply to any customer and any provider. The nature of services can vary widely from tangible services with more goods than actions to intangible services like advisory services or consulting. They can also be indirect, where the user does things themselves, or direct, where the provider does it for the user. Identifying the goods and actions in our services allows us to clearly specify what a service does and does not include. Now, support is just the assistance that the customer can expect from the provider when using the facility. We're going to continue to elaborate the rest of the customer-provider interaction model in the next section. But for now, let's make sure we understand USM's definition of a service, which is a service is a supported facility. And we'll need to dig into how the USM method specifies a service as a supported facility. But before we do, let's make sure we understand USM's concept of a facility. Businesses have been using outside-in techniques for many years now to understand customer needs. We're just going to focus on two techniques: customer expectation management and jobs to be done theory. But there's many others. The customer expectation management technique uses concepts like moments of truth and successful customer outcomes to understand the business process from the customer's point of view. Remember, the customer typically sees just one process. It's often made up of many different core business processes. Customer expectation management uses many of the lean thinking and outside-in concepts of business process management. But another aspect of customer expectation management can help you get to an outcome-based definition of service rather than individual outputs. The concept of successful customer outcomes, or SCO, helps accomplish this. Now remember, we're not decomposing the services. Services deliberately abstract the operational aspects of a business capability. Here's another technique that's interesting: jobs to be done. This technique looks at why the customer is going through a process. What are they trying to achieve? It gets to why customers buy. Remember, when customers talk about specific features, they're really thinking about what's most important to them. In this case, getting a good ride on a skateboard. So while they may talk about the wheels and the bearings, the reason they're talking about them is they want a great skateboard ride. So this is another way to get to the heart of a facility. But we still need a way to specify this. Once we've abstracted the facility from the customer's perspective, we can begin to decompose it. The first step is to identify the goods and actions in the facility. What's the nature of the service? What goods and actions are included? Then we can specify the functionality of the facility. The functionality of a facility specifies what a facility can do or what a user can do with it. If you're familiar with the IDLE guidance, think utility or fit for purpose when specifying functionality. The functionality of a facility can vary significantly from one service to another based on its nature, what goods or actions are deployed, and what agreements there are between the customer and the provider. Facilities are also characterized by functioning. Again, if you're familiar with IDLE, think of this as a warranty or fit for use. This is more generic than functionality. This has to do with how available the functionality is, how fast it performs, capacity, and so on. Support is specified in the same way. It's characterized by functionality, which support is provided, and functioning, how well the support is provided. So when we specify functionality, we say whether you can get called just a help desk or get only chat support, as an example. When we specify functioning, we specify how well the support is delivered. For example, what response times are, and so on. As we'll see in upcoming videos, all service specifications will be linked to USM's non-redundant process model and workflows. Specifying services in this way results in a unified approach to service definition for all services of any kind. And unified service specifications simplify catalog maintenance and service reporting. But since everyone's a provider, there's going to be many services to define. So let's take a quick look at a concept called the service tree. A service tree can be a spreadsheet, a mind map, or other tool that gives us a structured view of an organization's services. And while it seems simple on the surface, it's really easy to get lost in the woods. Services are recursive. That's because we're all service providers, right? It may sound silly, but understanding whether you're the customer or the provider when defining services is important. And where you are within the service supply chain is also important. Remember, we're all providers on the back end and customers on the front end. Using the customer supplier model to clearly place where you are within the overall service chain can help when establishing a service tree structure. And this can get trickier than it may seem. When starting to build your service tree, keep in mind the structure of the service portfolio, service catalog, and the request catalog. These are very different views of your services. The forest is a macro view. It lists not only the services currently being provided, but those that have been withdrawn and those that could potentially be provided. The portfolio shows all services in various stages of planning, development, or consideration. The woods represents a specific area of the forest. It's a subset of the portfolio. It includes services that are currently available for consumption and provides detailed information about the service, what goods and actions are included, and the functionality and functioning of both the facility and the support. And the trees are individual components in the woods. These are operational in nature and represent requests that customers can initiate. So requests focus on outputs. Services focus on successful customer outcomes. And portfolios focus on strategy. Okay, so a service is a supported facility and can be specified by the facility and the support in terms of functionality and functioning. And these production services are supported by operations. USM's logically repeatable definition of a service can be repeated by all service teams across the service ecosystem. But how do we standardize and localize operational routines across all these service teams when multiple practice frameworks are in use? This is going to lead us into a discussion about processes and decomposition. The fact is, our operational routines have an enormous impact on the customer experience. Simply put, a routine is a way of working. To be more specific, a routine is what we practice. They specify what activities we do, which operators do these activities, and provide instructions on how to execute these tasks. The USM method provides a unified, standardized, and consistent approach both to the definition of services as well as the routines needed to manage them. The customer experience is measured over time, and this means managing services has become mission critical. Managing operational routines across complex, rapidly changing service supply chains is the key to consistently great customer experience. So let's review this section and we'll move on to the next. If we're going to achieve the vision of enterprise service management, we'll need a logically repeatable and unambiguous definition of a service that all providers within the service chain can use to define their services. USM's customer provider interaction model applies to all customers and providers, regardless of industry or domain. It's universal and generic enough for everyone. A service is a supported facility. This unambiguous definition of a service can be specified in detail by all service teams. When specifying any service, the facility is defined in terms of the goods and actions provided by the facility. Both the facility and the support can be characterized in terms of functionality and functioning. This specification can apply for any service provider and any service and enables consistent agreements, reporting, and management across the service ecosystem. The Service Foundation has developed workshops in consultation with USM professionals. The Service Agreement Workshop is one example. If you'd like more information about USM workshops, contact me by clicking the link or sending me an email.